This is a pretty interesting story. So, as you all know, there was a terrible mass shooting of 50 Muslims in 2 mosques in New Zealand by a white supremacist. A horrifying event where 50 innocent people were killed while they were praying, an act that nobody in the West can defend and everyone is disgusted by it. But the media in the West, particularly in America, has immediately jumped to blame this terrible event on right-wingers and people in general who talk about the danger of radical Islam and what threat it can be to Western civilization. So, of course, they blame President Trump because he talked in the past about the dangers of radical Islam, even though the shooter in his manifesto has said that he isn't conservative and he isn't a supporter of President Trump. The left in America still found a way to blame this event on Trump. So, let's try to understand this. Innocent Muslims are killed in New Zealand by a white supremacist, but somehow people in America, especially the right-wingers, are to blame because they talk about the threat of radical Islam. And again, people usually talk about radical Islam, not Islam in general, and especially not the non-radical regular Muslims. And one of those people who got blamed for this was, of all people, Chelsea Clinton. The background of this story was that Chelsea Clinton condemned the anti-Semitism by the new Congresswoman Omar, who's been spewing anti-Semitic tropes recently and in the past. For example, in the past she would say that Israel has hypnotized the world, and because Jews are somehow hypnotizing the world, that's why the majority of countries in the West are supportive of Israel. Not because the other side is controlled by a literal terrorist organization, but that's a story for another time. And recently, Congresswoman Omar has said that the Jews in America who support Israel are problematic because, according to Omar, they have dual loyalty and they shouldn't be trusted. That's one of the oldest anti-Semitic tropes in the book that says Jews should be looked at differently because they may have dual loyalty to Israel and they aren't actually loyal to the country where they live. So that's why Chelsea Clinton condemned her, and because of that, a group of radical leftists have approached her and blamed her for the shootings in New Zealand, saying that Islamophobia she spewed caused this horrible event. Here's a video of that encounter.
After all that you have done and all the Islamophobia that you have sowed.
I'm so sorry. Well, certainly it was never my intention. I do believe words matter. I believe we have to show
They do matter. And this right here is the result of a massacre stoked by people like you and the words that you have put out into the world. And I want you to know that, and I want you to feel that deep inside. The 49 people died because of the rhetoric that you put out there.
I'm so sorry.
I don't think.
What does "I'm sorry you feel that way" mean? What does that mean?
After all that you have done and all the Islamophobia that you have sowed.
I'm so sorry. Well, certainly it was never my intention. I do believe words matter. I believe we have to show
They do matter. And this right here is the result of a massacre stoked by people like you and the words that you have put out into the world. And I want you to know that, and I want you to feel that deep inside. The 49 people died because of the rhetoric that you put out there.
I'm so sorry.
I don't think.
What does "I'm sorry you feel that way" mean? What does that mean?
Now this is just disgusting. Chelsea Clinton didn't do anything wrong in condemning anti-Semitism by the Congresswoman Omar, but these radical leftists don't think so, and they are trying to take out everyone that doesn't agree with them. That's why they're attacking her, because Chelsea Clinton isn't far left enough for them, and it's really hard to understand what condemning anti-Semitism has anything to do with a mass shooting of innocent Muslims across the world in New Zealand. It's just mind-boggling, because of course Chelsea Clinton doesn't have anything to do with this. It'll be interesting to see the future of the Democratic Party, because you can already see the fracture that is created between the radicals of the Democratic Party and some of the moderates that are still there. For example, here's a video of another new Congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib, on CNN, where she's asked by Jake Tapper to condemn actions of these radical groups, and just watch her dodging the questions, and at the end all she does is talk about Islamophobia and how that is the problem in the United States.
Hear that it's a video that's gone pretty viral, but basically this NYU student is saying that because Chelsea Clinton confronted Ilhan Omar, Congresswoman Omar, in the way she did, that the massacre is partly her fault. I don't know if you saw it, but I'm wondering what your response is.
Well, I know, Congresswoman Omar and myself have gotten so many death threats. I think she is probably, really, I actually pray every day for her safety. I can just tell you the kind of public disagreement and the kind of language that sometimes is being used towards disagreeing with her on a number of fronts, foreign policy issues. People need to be very careful. She's become very much a target. And right after not only the West Virginia, poster, putting her face there with the 9/11 towers in the background, this is a woman that is a mother, that is an American, that is serving her country. And we need to be very careful when we disagree publicly when we disagree publicly on various policy agreements, we have to be very careful in the language that we use. And I can tell you, look, I have seen the letters and have seen the various posts from not only from Republicans, but also Democrats, that when we target or disagree, we need to be very careful in that it's not feeding into the Islamophobia that is growing in our country.
But this is just what the Democratic Party has become. It is moving far to the left in rapid manner, and you will see how these radical leftists are purging moderate Democrats from their own party, and the moderates just wouldn't be electable anymore. Now let's take a look at this clip where Ben Shapiro actually defends Chelsea Clinton, and that just goes to show you how insane the Democrats have become when right-wingers have to defend someone like Chelsea Clinton.
So Chelsea Clinton was one of the people who called out Ilhan Omar for using anti-Semitic language. Well, students confronted Chelsea Clinton, and they are blaming Chelsea Clinton, these students, they are blaming Chelsea Clinton for the shooting in Christchurch. Okay, this is how radical the radical fringe of the left is. Chelsea Clinton is somehow to blame for a white supremacist shooting up a church in Christchurch because she called out anti-Semitism from Ilhan Omar. This went viral over the weekend. Students confronting Chelsea Clinton.
After all that you have done and all this Islamophobia that you have stoked.
I'm so sorry. Well, certainly it was never my intention. I do believe words matter. I believe we have to show
They do
solidarity
matter. And
with
this right here is the result of a massacre stoked by people like you and the words that you put out into the world. And I want you to know that, and I want you to feel that deep inside. 49 people died because of the rhetoric that you put out there.
You can hear people snapping in the background.
What does "I'm sorry you feel that way" mean? What does that mean?
What is she supposed to apologize for? She's supposed to apologize because she called out Ilhan Omar for being anti-Semitic. So if you call out a Muslim for being anti-Semitic, then you're responsible for the murder of other unrelated Muslims who are not being anti-Semitic in Christchurch. Okay, and then these two people, the people who are going after Chelsea Clinton, for goodness sake. I mean, how radical is the left? They're making me defend Chelsea Clinton now. Okay, this is unbelievable. These two people were given a platform in BuzzFeed News, a platform to explain why they called out Chelsea Clinton for the shooting in Christchurch. BuzzFeed News posted a piece by these two radicals, whose names are Lynn Tweek and Rose Asaf. And it says, why we confronted Chelsea Clinton at the Christchurch vigil. Here's why. Yesterday, we posted a video of Leanne confronting Chelsea Clinton at a vigil for the victims of the white supremacist New Zealand mosque massacre. Today, we woke up with over 100,000 people talking about it on Twitter. Needless to say, this is not what we expected. Well, it sort of was. We went to the vigil for one reason, to grieve the loss of innocent lives that were stolen from this world by vile hatred. We wanted to join our friends and colleagues in a time of heartbreak and agony to remember the 49 Muslims who were murdered for being Muslim. We did a double take when we first noticed Chelsea Clinton was at the vigil. Just weeks before this tragedy, we bore witness to a bigoted anti-Muslim mob coming after Representative Ilhan Omar for speaking the truth about the massive influence of the Israel lobby in this country. We believe Ilhan Omar did nothing wrong except challenge the status quo, but the way many people chose to criticize Omar made her vulnerable to anti-Muslim hatred and death threats. We were shocked when Clinton arrived at the vigil, given that she had not yet apologized to Representative Omar for the public vilification against her. So Ilhan Omar was a wounded innocent in all this. Chelsea Clinton was the offender, and because Chelsea Clinton called out Ilhan Omar for being an anti-Semite, this supposedly led a white supremacist to murder people in halfway around the world in New Zealand. Many have said it was unfair to connect Chelsea's words to the massacre in Christchurch, these two dolts write. To them, we say that anti-Muslim bigotry must be addressed wherever it exists. That includes Chelsea Clinton. Okay, a couple of quick notes about the two people who were just given space in BuzzFeed to harass Chelsea Clinton some more. Okay, it turns out that both of these people are deeply radical in every possible way. And they got their defenders, of course, from the radical left and their friends, the folks over at The Intercept and such. So a couple of things. Dweek tweeted out, quote, you're only interested in demolishing Israel, not in finding a solution. Demolishing Israel is a solution. So the same people who are calling out Chelsea Clinton for supposedly being anti-Islam, for calling out Ilhan Omar, are themselves deeply anti-Semitic to the point where they are calling for the full demolition of Israel. The full demolition of Israel. It's unbelievable. Okay, and the other woman who wrote this repeatedly used the term, the F word, for gay people in the United States. But those people were given a platform by BuzzFeed News. It's just wonderful. And this sort of dishonesty was endemic in the media. Endemic. Okay, Linda Sarsour did the same thing. Linda Sarsour, radical anti-Semite, and by the way, friend to terrorists, right? Legitimately has stood with terrorist Razmia Odeh on stage and hugged her and all the rest. Linda Sarsour tweeted out, I am triggered by those who piled on Representative Ilhan Omar and incited a hate mob against her until she got assassination threats, now giving condolences to our community. What we need you to do is reflect on how you contribute to Islamophobia and stop doing that. So you see how this works? The idea now is that if you criticized Ilhan Omar for being an anti-Semite, somehow you were responsible for the massacre in Christchurch.